While the debate over legal issues and content distribution continues, the peer-to-peer industry is making strides in bringing its technologies into the mainstream. With many solutions now on the way, including a number we'll hear about today, there's also an active trade association to support the commercial development of peer-to-peer. My name is Marty Lafferty. I'm the CEO of the DCIA, Distributed Computing Industry Association. It was formed in July 2003 to foster commercial development of peer-to-peer for authorized distribution of copyrighted works using file-sharing applications. We support content rights holders, P2P software developers, service and support companies, and related others to develop this wonderful distribution channel. And we've grown from 2 to 80 members since our inception. In the environment we're striving to create, rights holders will have the digital rights management tools and support services to manage key aspects of every transaction, to support and monetize those through such means as advertising, sponsorships, cross-promotion, packaging, subscriptions, and paid downloads, whether their works are initially just entered into distribution by themselves or by others, including consumers. We view civilization as going through a digital evolution, a conversion, if you will, where traditionally video content came to us through cable or satellite, voice came through telco lines or cell services, music was transmitted over the air, and data was transmitted through dial-up modem or broadband. Moving forward, all of this data becomes digital bits, fungible content that will be all available through a choice of IP, whether it's telco, cable, power, or some combination of satellite and terrestrial wireless. And reception will happen on any network device, whether consumers want to do such iconoclastic activities as watch a TV program on a cell phone or sit in front of a 6-foot plasma screen and have a long-distance conversation using some form of P2P-based VoIP. The source for all this content and the vehicle for communicating it will be enhanced P2P, integrating search with discovery and recommendation, with caching, with other content accelerators. And the impact on entertainment is that viewers and listeners will have instant access to every piece of pre-recorded content and the ability to be switched to every live event anywhere in the world at their will, all through P2P. For the models to succeed in this environment, they need to be able to work with open source clients and swarming technologies. Joining me today on our panel are John Beezer from Shared Media Licensing, John Jones from Senior Vice President of Programming at MusicNet, Don Kosak, the CTO of Lycos, Billy McNair, co-founder and CEO of PeerFlix, Les Ottolenghi, co-founder and CEO of Intent MediaWorks, and in the audience, Sam Pat from Recora, and Chip Venter, CEO of Digital Containers. To start with, please briefly highlight for the diverse group we have here, your role in advancing next generation P2P. How will DRM and sponsorship be involved in that? What other licensed content and non-content based P2P business models do you see? Starting with John and the WeedShare business model.
Hi, with WeedShare. Weed is a super distribution format. Works like this. If you get a Weed file, you can play it 3 times for free. Then you're asked to buy it. If you like it, you can go ahead and buy it, and you play it as much as you want on up to 3 computers, burn it to CD all you want, transfer it to portable devices. If you buy a file and share it with someone else who buys it, you earn a commission for bringing it about the sale. Rights holders make money on every transaction, so sharing is a good thing. It makes money for everybody involved. It also, as a consequence, it makes it easy to sell files. Essentially, you can put them on your blog, you can put them in your peer-to-peer share folder, you can put them on your MySpace page. We like to say the store is in the file, so wherever the file goes, it's monetized. You can share it freely. We do use DRM, we're based on Windows Media DRM. We see it more as an accounting tool. It's not a very effective lock, and I think people have known that for years. It's just enough of a barrier that when you've had your 3 free plays, we can tell you it's time to buy the file, and we're fully aware you can free the content any way you like, but we're making a proposition which says go ahead and buy it, and if you share it, we'll help you earn revenue too. We'll cut you in on the action. So it pretty much puts everybody on the same side. Also, I mean, DRM, I think it's basic marketing that you try not to irritate the hell out of your customers, so we don't use DRM to unreasonably block access. It's there to help everyone. Not real big on the sponsorship model. I think this is a really interesting question. In particular, I think it makes a lot of sense with video. Less so, in my opinion, with audio. think that's a whole question.
Okay. And John, what's MusicNet's relationship to P2P these days?
We're a business-to-business provider of digital media for a number of non-P2P services. They include Yahoo and MTV. And about a year and a half ago, we started a relationship with iMesh, who were the first former P2P to settle with the RIAA and major labels. Since that time, we've launched a terrific service through iMesh using MusicNet's content and platform. It's about 2.5 million tracks out in the marketplace. All of the tracks were fingerprinted by iMesh, and they then looked at locking down the content that was fingerprinted from the MusicNet service and blocking any of that from P2P usage. So effectively, there's a component of legal and openly distributed content in the service commingled in the overall operation. Timing is right for this panel because iMesh announced this morning that they are launching BearShare, which is the first portable peer-to-peer service. BearShare, again, another sort of old-school P2P that settled with the RIAA and was acquired by iMesh. That's the first portable service using Windows Media Files in the place for sure technology that's coming out in the marketplace. I have to say that the iMesh guys have built a fantastic media player on top of our core technology and platform, and we're thrilled to see them expand. They're in the US and Canada and looking at other territories as we speak.
Thanks very much. Don, what's Lycos' relation to P2P?
Most people know Lycos as the standard portal of the 1990s with its search engine and other content. Over the last year, we've really put a lot of effort into building up our digital entertainment portfolio as well with the relaunch of Lycos Entertainment and the very recent launch last month of the new Lycos Mail platform. Lycos Mail platform, it has 1 million mail users currently, and all of those users are able to share very large files, not 5 megabytes or 10 megabytes, but 5 gigabytes, 10 gigabytes. This allows the super distribution of DRM locked video, much like John was talking about, or music. So it's a one step forward into this model for a peer-based distribution of games, music, video. We're also working on a number of other peer-to-peer technologies. With our coverage of the 2006 World Cup, we used an innovative peer-to-peer streaming technology to stream the content. As many people tuned in to find out what was going on with the madness surrounding World Cup, they were getting the video streamed to them from their peers, not just our service. So we were able to do a lot more for a lot less money.
Thank you. And Billy, where's the PeerFlix business model these days?
I think PeerFlix is a little bit different from the gentleman here on the panel. We're here maybe to provide a slightly different perspective on peer-to-peer. Our business model at PeerFlix started, the concept originally initiated in peer-to-peer transfer of large video files, particularly movies. And very quickly, within the first few months of coming up with the concept of the company, realized that the market for the immediate term in the movie space, and by immediate term I kind of mean the next 5+ years, was going to be in the physical world. So we've actually employed a peer-to-peer model in the physical world, enabling people to take the DVDs they have laying around their house and use those DVDs to trade with others to get the DVDs they want. We as PeerFlix don't ever come in contact with the DVDs, we just facilitate the transaction. So it truly is a peer-to-peer service in that the DVD is moving directly from one individual to the next, but we're doing it today in the physical world and with physical DVDs as opposed to digital content, mostly based out of business decisions that we think for the next, again, 5 years or even longer, the market on the movie side is going to be in the physical space.
Okay. And let's talk about Palladia and MyPeer business model a little bit.
Intent MediaWorks is a company that distributes content vis-a-vis any of the open peer-to-peer networks. So we have mapped to the various protocols, Fast Track, Ntala2, Overnet, eDonkey, BitTorrent, and we're able to saturate those networks with licensed, legal, authorized content files. So, as an example, we have a large catalog owner of music. It's one of our clients. And we take that catalog and we distribute their titles throughout peer-to-peer with DRM or with like DRM type functionality. Now, the results of that type of distribution, I'll use July as an example. 60,000 of their files, their top files, were distributed over peer-to-peer for 5.5 million downloads. Now, those files are sold, which means that the consumer either pays something for them, typically in the range of normal retail you see on websites, or we provide advertising with that content. So we do ad-supported music files, and we do ad-supported video files over peer-to-peer. Our growth rate is about 50% every month with additional downloads. We did 52 million downloads last month. We're on track for somewhere in the range of 65 to 70 million this month, with the run rate actually about 90 million going into October. The space of peer-to-peer is wide open. It hasn't been commercialized except for a couple of companies here on this panel. But what's essential about it is that it's a more efficient means for distribution of information and media, and by virtue of its architecture, by virtue of the way that it's been deployed, it will succeed in a much better manner than the methods you've seen previously, which is strictly a website, doing streaming from a website, or downloading directly from a website. So Intent Media Works totally believes in this, not just from a fundamental business point of view, but we understand that the technology is superior and will win out in the long run.
Thank you. In or out? Mr. Vax? You're out. Okay. Too many people anyway. So wrap it up, Chip, in terms of digital containers and the overall P2P platform.
Digital Containers has created patented technology for super distribution of digital goods. And it means all digital goods, not just music or videos. As you know, in P2P, people are trading files. And the inherent problem with P2P is those files are easily replicated. Well, most CRM systems are designed to stop you from replicating things, right? Well, our system encourages you to replicate. It encourages copying because the content is wrapped in a container that perpetually tracks the movement of the content and perpetually monetizes it because the payment system actually travels with the content. It's also designed to run irregardless of whether someone has a client installed. And so super distribution is all about sharing, right? In fact, there was just a recent study by Sharp Institute saying that 90% of the people using the internet are sharing some sort of content every week. And we all do it. We send it by email, we send it. Well, again, that's the beauty of peer-to-peer, sort of the ultimate way to share. And the ability to actually control and watch and have some sort of authority over the access to the files is what we think we're contributing to the P2P marketplace. And again, we sat in several panels, I know you all have this week, hearing about companies like YouTube who are the hottest thing going, but are choking on their own bandwidth needs. The real benefit of peer-to-peer in the long run is to actually bring efficient infrastructure models to some of those companies so they can actually make money on all that traffic.
YouTube spending $1 million a month on bandwidth right now. How much
losing $1 million a month?
investing? How much would they have to invest to accomplish that with P2P?
Gosh, they could probably get less and stuff for $1.
$100,000 less. So it's real. Starting with John Jones, sort of a general question on how you would assess where the P2P marketplace is now in terms of authorized content distribution, what's working, what's still not working, where does the channel come from, and where do you see it heading, and any statistics that you might have to help illustrate your point of view.
Sure. Well, it's early days for the legitimization of P2P, just working with active services in the marketplace. We find that any of the services that we work with, it all comes down to marketing, and I think P2P has a clear advantage because there's innate viral marketing there with the product, and certainly has some number of users already in the market rather than somebody going out and trying to make a brand anew in the marketplace. So generally what we see with them is, the services operate the way that all music subscription or download services operate. There's a free trial, and then there's an opportunity for the consumer to stay on. The free trial under the iMesh model was interesting. They went out at $1 as a very sort of low barrier entry trial, and then people were moved up to a standard subscription offering after that. They were really revving the technology as they came out to market. There was not the ability to acquire tracks initially when they launched. That came downstream from the initial launch. But as you might expect, the traffic was extremely spiky for the first few months of operation with them, and it was exciting to see the amount of activity from the users in the marketplace against that content during that time. And I expect that our bandwidth meters are pinning today based on bear share coming online, even though it may not have the number of users it once had. We expect that there'll be a lot of people hitting the service as a result of just a new opportunity like that.
Thanks. Don?
So one of the things that's clearly working today is the unlicensed content peer-to-peer. And in fact, those platforms and their technology and the evolvement of that technology is something that we're hoping we'll be able to leverage. And Music Now obviously is leveraging some of the original ones to provide this licensed content distribution. I really think that super distribution, the pieces are all coming together today in order for that to move forward. And the fact that there's several people here at the table who have super distribution models and businesses forming is an indication of that. At Lycos, we're looking at super distribution and we're moving forward and supporting that with different products. I think one of the key pieces is the convenience now is coming to the table, where before you really needed to be kind of a hacker to go out and get things, and that's really changing now. So I think we're at that tipping point of the whole model.
Thank you. Billy?
Again, looking at it from the movie perspective, which definitely, in terms of involvement, is much slower today than the music side of things. On the movie side, I think that certainly the future is in the peer-to-peer model, but I think I agree that today it's in its infancy. I think that for the P2P space to really blossom on the movie side, it's a function of having the digital content there, and the digital content just simply isn't there. I mean, if you look at straight from financial side of things, what MovieLink and Cinema Now, their kind of combined revenue as digital providers of movies is about $10 million a year. You look at just what Netflix, Blockbuster, and Hollywood Video Movie Gallery do, it's $10 billion. So you're talking about 1,000 times the revenue. And that just goes to show that, again, the digital content isn't there, and the content needs to be there before it can really blossom in the peer-to-peer space. So there's no doubt that it's coming and that it ultimately will be the best form of distribution. But again, speaking from our perspective on the movie side, it's going to be a while. The music side, I think, is no doubt much, much further along. And the content clearly is there on the music side.
Les?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The music is where it's been at, because that's how the genesis of open peer-to-peer began, was to share music, unfortunately, illegally through systems like Napster. But as you see here on this panel, and I think MusicNet's got it right in the sense that they have said, hey, this is a big opportunity, you've got a marketplace to put music in a licensed and authorized fashion, and we can make money doing that. Because there's a large audience already there, and they're interested in that content. What a great concept, huh? Go where your market is. And of course, the issues, though, in getting to that audience are several. There's portability, there's device independence, and there's the necessity for good desktop-based clients. So I'm very encouraged to hear what Lycos is doing, because it's leading toward desktop applications that can manage the process of downloading media from several different open peer-to-peer networks, and ultimately make the management not only downloading it and using it on the desktop, but transferring it over to other devices, a possibility now. not trying to read behind your R&D, but I can imagine that that's where some of this thinking has got to be going. What we've seen in the marketplace is this. Music still predominates. There is some video, mostly short form. And a lot of the user-generated content that you're starting to see on the YouTubes, the Gubas, Pure videos, and so on, is being transported now over to peer-to-peer. And it's appearing as mashup content. So re-articulation of video from a website, downloaded, gets mashed up and pushed back out to B2P. And where there's these point-to-point connections like Micos is bringing to the table, you're going to see more transference of content in that fashion. Because people really like to share funny videos with each other. They like to share music. They don't like to share full-length feature film. That's not what they do. But they do like to share rich media with each other. And our company takes content from licensed authorized sources and then puts that protective layer around the content and pushes it out en masse through B2B. But the area we see the most growth coming in is a user-generated distribution through B2B. And we think that whoever is going to build that application set on the desktop could be the big winner in this space.
And I might add that the company that decides to do that, unless they're using P2P, will not be a big winner because they'll get checked bandwidth-wise as well. But, last summer, about this time, the Supreme Court ruled that P2P is legal, which is a lot of people perceive the ruling as being the opposite. They're saying that P2P networking is legal, but inducing people to send copyrighted rights over it is illegal. But there seems to be a lingering sort of impression in the content companies that somehow or another this type of networking still has some sort of uncontrolled, chaotic element to it. And again, I think going back to what you were saying about the dirt for content, that's really what we're still fighting against. And if people would get rid of their biases and kind of look under the covers, they'd see that this is a very, very highly controllable environment, again, with tremendous efficiencies that solve a lot of problems out there that people are wrestling with.
And I mentioned the 52.5 million downloads. I mean, our bandwidth costs in July were around $15,000 for that. So that includes doing some other things in the background that weren't related to B2B. So that's, you think about that as opposed to using a website as your means of distributing content, whether it's from a major production studio or whether it's user-generated, and the efficiencies are definitely there.
John, do you have any last comments?
Yeah, I think the potential for commercial use of peer-to-peer is there. I think we've been sort of fighting battles for several years, which are now ending, and so the next step is to successfully commercialize. We've found we've never been concerned about sharing. Our files are made to be shared, but we have struggled with seeding the networks. When people complain about their stuff being out on peer-to-peer, it doesn't necessarily occur to you that if you really want your stuff out there, that it's actually not trivial to get it distributed. We recently did a trial with rap artist Romeo. We were very pleased with the conversion ratio, meaning the number of people who tried versus the number of people who bought. That was successful, but the scale was not. And so we've discontinued that, and we're pushing on MySpace now, and that's a little more successful. So I think there's some new technologies. Certainly the managed networks, I think, they have potential, and from our perspective, they're a really smart move. And I think that's going to make it a lot easier to get stuff out. I'm also excited about sort of more diverse uses of peer-to-peer. I see Skype as a great way to trade files. Obviously, it's a phone service, but if you're talking to someone about music, there's no reason you can't just shoot them a file while you're doing it. So I think the battles are behind us, and now the real work begins.
Okay. Just picking up on Chip's comment about the MGM Grokster decision in the Supreme Court a little over a year ago, current events in this space continue to have headlines that are pretty rough and wild. So there are about six of them I can think of, and there's six panelists, so if we each just talk about it, starting with Don. We have the Streamcast or Morpheus back in court after trying to settle and not being able to get the content community to come up with something that worked. We have Kazaa settling for $115 million with the recording industry and MPAA in recent weeks with AltNet. They're business partner announcing a global file registry solution. We have the RIAA now suing LimeWire, and we have and BearShare, good news, BearShare launching, coming out of its hibernation like a good bear, and launching as a portable service with IMAX. So there are about half a dozen headlines, and just starting with Don. The question I have is, pick one of those headlines, and what's the impact going to be on this channel, and when will we know when that's happening? What will be different once we've digested these changes?
Yeah, I think that the RIAA and other content holders that are suing these various open peer-to-peer networks, they've evolved in their strategy. They're no longer aiming to simply shut down. Typically, they're aiming for some type of cash settlement plus agreements to modify the behavior of the peer-to-peer network so that there's some screening for commercial content on the network. And that's having an impact. I think the revenue model off of some of those companies is going to change. A lot of them typically you download the client on your machine along with a host of adware and other undesirable software. I think that as they go legitimate, they're going to be able to derive revenue from other means, and the quality to the consumer is going to go up of all of those services.
Thanks, Billy. Speaking specifically to the Kazaa settlement, I think that to Chip's earlier point, it's about a recognition that of what the power of the peer-to-peer environment is and what it can mean for the content owners. And I think it's also about realizing that it's really not kind of the wild, wild west out there, that there is a way to use peer-to-peer and distributed computing to get these large media files into people's hands much more efficiently than you can through directly from a website. And I think I look at it as kind of a sequence for us to get to where we need to get to. And first and foremost is the comfort around legality and DRM. Once that's in place, then you're going to move from the DRM and legality to where the content owners actually start to get comfortable with their content being distributed. And then once there's that degree of comfort, then you're going to see them start to open it up more and make more content available to those channels. And it has to happen, in my opinion, in that sequence. So the first step is getting the recognition of the legality of it and the comfort, which with these settlements seems to be increasing, which I think will then lead to more and more content being out there, both on the music and on the film side. And as there's more content, naturally there's going to be more distribution of it through the networks.
Thanks. Les?
Yeah, I think the Kazaa settlement does point to the commercialization of peer-to-peer, and it's really a seminal point because the Kazaa has been recognized for post-Napster as sort of the leading P2P application. The one problem here that could potentially raise its ugly head is that when you make the entire network from the actual search engine, Kazaa, completely commercialized, you might actually disperse your users into other networks. And we think about that a lot because we attack things below the search engine. We attack things at the protocol level, and we're able to saturate hundreds of results in one search. So someone searches for Madonna, and we have a Madonna file. We can make sure that the first page or the second page are 90% saturated with Madonna files from us. However, if you change the search engine itself to only read commercially available content, and that's completely filtered, there is, at least from our experience, an understanding in the community that unless you're adding additional value, that is, you're doing something like helping somebody once they get a legal file, trade it with their buddy, or post it to a social network, or do something else like a mashup or a remix, that you might actually lose that person and send them off to a darknet. Now, have there been hundreds of thousands of darknets that have emerged? Well, there was a prediction that they would. I don't see it necessarily, and I do agree that services like iMesh are starting to see a rebound back in their usage because they're providing additional value. But it's a real delicate balance as to what the consumer wants. Consumer actually doesn't want to steal stuff. What the consumer wants to do is get things the way they want it and be able to use it the way they want it, which goes back to the transportability, the ability to do things device independent, and the ability to remix or mash up content. If you start filling in those capabilities, Kazaa itself actually starts filling in those capabilities, then they'll retain their usership, and this will be a very successful commercial enterprise.
Going again back to these lawsuits and the settlements, it's sort of a continuous drumbeat of sort of, I don't know, bad news about P2P. Not bad news, a settlement's a good thing, but a $100 million settlement is sort of admitting guilt, right? And then you file new lawsuits. In other words, there's still this kind of thing, this pall hanging over P2P that somehow, again, is illegal. And what gets buried under that news is news that British Telecom, for example, just rolled out a hybrid network using P2P. Great companies like Contiki are getting fantastic, traction inside the enterprise. I think it's really good that this stuff is being played out, but unfortunately, I mean, we don't. After the LimeWire suit, is there another one, on the horizon? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll start by kissing up to the moderator. I think, 3 years ago when Marty started down this path, I don't think a lot of this was considered possible, and I'm talking about the various settlements and repurposing. In fact, I think from content owners, the phrase "over my dead body" was frequently used. But I think through trying to find common ground instead of fighting, and kind of realizing some of the inevitabilities of this, and through diplomatic skills, we've seen progress. So I guess I would sort of say, Marty, now for your next impossible stunt, we've got to make these things work. So I think everyone's come to the table, everyone's agreed that we need to move forward together, and now there's this great period of experimentation. And I can't honestly say I see a model that I believe in. I see all these models could work, but the proof is going to be when they do. So I think we've come very far enough to justify optimism, but we still have a long way to go. I guess in terms of how do you know, I jotted some things down. I think when you see a label doing a peer-to-peer promotion, not just tolerating, but actively using, I think maybe when spyware goes away, or when Fox Interactive buys a peer-to-peer network, those would be signs of progress.
Stay tuned. Last word from John.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to look at this in the sort of standard supply and distribution chain with a P2P network being in the middle, but in terms of settling the issues on the content supply side seem to be getting flattened over time, and I'm certainly encouraged that not just labels, but other content creators are looking at the model and thinking that it's an extremely efficient means of getting content out to the consumer. The impediment from my perspective is really on the consumer side, that peer-to-peer has unfortunately been sort of painted with this poor experience, and that piece needs to be overcome, I think, and that's where the challenge is. But I'm encouraged to hear what everybody else is saying on the panel, just that there's new means of doing that and coming out with services that will actually, that will really not be a cleaned up peer-to-peer, but a new means of monetizing the opportunity of distribution that starts afresh.
Okay. Staying on this thread, if we had the CEOs of the 4 top music labels in the room and the 6 top motion picture studios in the room, and there was no retribution for saying whatever you wanted to say, starting with Billy, what would you tell them? What action should they take to accelerate commercial development of P2P?
I think probably the first one and the most obvious is just an endorsement of the DRM and standardization around it, so that, again, coming back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about the comfort element, they could get the comfort element. And then secondly, if those 10 individuals were in the room, I think sitting in a round table and actually breaking out an Excel model and showing them the financial impact of what it can mean, because again, being most familiar with the movie side of things, looking at the studios, the DVD is the most profitable thing that the movie studios have today. It's more profitable by far than what they make on a theatrical release. It's more profitable than really anything else they have out there. There's next to zero marginal cost to produce a DVD, and they can sell it at $10 or $15. So for them to move away from a physical model into a digital model, they really need to clearly see and understand that the economics of that digital model are far superior to even producing the DVD that costs a couple of cents to produce, when in fact on the digital side there can be almost no cost of production or distribution. So I think first and foremost it's about getting the DRM squared away, and then secondly it's just an economics driven business. So the more they see dollars and the more profit they see in the digital side of things, the more likely and more apt they're going to be to endorse it. And I think you see that with what iTunes has done. Certainly it started on the music side, but increasingly you're seeing more television networks putting shows there for distribution, and that's just, it's kind of dipping your toes in the water to A, see if it's going to lead to piracy, and B, how that potentially cannibalizes your existing channels and your existing distribution channels. And I think that increasingly as they see that it is at higher margins, that they'll be more apt to endorse it.
Les?
Dive in. You got to dive in if you're going to be in this business. You've got a more efficient way to run your supply chain. You're going to do it on a distributed computing basis, and if you want to make your content available to where consumers are, you've got to dive into the P2P space. First and foremost, the distributed model is lower cost for distribution. Everyone on this panel keeps hitting that theme. It's true. Take a look at it. Even compare it against Contiki and Akamai. It's at a much, much lower cost of distribution P2P. Second, if you're thinking about the future and your production, you're noticing that production can be done by a much smaller group of people with much less resources, and that production can look really good. And if you don't come in and fill the vacuum and use P2P for your own uses, for your own self-interest, somebody else who can produce content as well as you can with as good production quality is going to fill that vacuum. And if the music industry didn't see Napster coming, the video and film industry did not see YouTube coming. So you better see this coming. It's going to hit you. And with BitTorrent and other types of swarming technologies, whether or not Kazaa commercializes and whether or not BitTorrent commercializes, somebody will come in and fill the gap for quality of service delivery using P2P. We're in partnership with a company that will be announced that is doing P2P streaming at a much higher quality level than has been seen before in the marketplace. In September, we'll be producing our first television show over this network. We have 900 supernodes that have already signed up to redistribute. Each supernode can support over 1,000 users. That number should scale to about 12,000 users before the end of the year. So you're going to see not only peer-to-peer file download distribution, you're going to see streaming capabilities coming online that are very high quality. In terms of promotion, and it was mentioned before, when the majors get into promotion over P2P, we're actually running music promotions with the majors. In fact, a quarter of our revenues come from pushing out promotional tracks and music over P2P. And this past spring, we took a television show that'll be on this fall from NBC and distributed it over P2P for 1 month just to see what the numbers would be. Since then, all the major film and television studios have approached us for pushing pilots out. Now, that's not to say that they're going to push out their shows completely on peer-to-peer, but they are testing the waters with a complete television show, 22 and a half minutes, pushed out through P2P with commercial interruption.
Building on what Les and Billy had to say, there's a degree of inevitability around this. I mean, the efficiencies that P2P offers just will, over time, start to become more and more apparent. And when people recognize that the controls work, again, this is an inevitability. So what I would say to the executives if they were sitting in this room is take some of their massive lobbying dollars and their massive legal fees that they're using to aim at these small sort of original P2P companies and start worrying about net neutrality. Because if this net neutrality stuff goes through, there's going to be a tax on every movie going over the internet that's going to be come from Verizon or SBC and others. And that's the elephant in the room that everybody, I think, should start paying more attention to.
Good. John?
I would, speaking strictly about music, because that's where I'm focused, I would remind them that music has to feel free. And I say remind them because I think they already know this. Radio feels free. When you go to a friend's and they play music for you, it feels free. We hear music all the time everywhere we go. On average, we only buy about 10 CDs a year. In fact, it occurred to me recently that I know every Beatles song by heart, but I have never bought a Beatles product. It's just all around us, and that's by design. Music is kind of the antithesis of commerce. You don't really want to pull out your wallet and pay for every song. So music has to feel free, and I think 30-second samples are kind of a poor substitute. Advertising can potentially spoil the mood of the song. So I think I would strongly recommend provisions for free plays, and I think that's coming. That's what we've been battling for a couple years now, and I'm optimistic that we'll see it.
Good. John?
Sure. I mean, I think from my perspective, having worked with the majors around, the original iterations of subscription services, hopefully the film studios, cable companies, broadcasters are learning from the experience that the music industry had about peer-to-peer. I think one of the key things that was always a challenge for us in the marketplace is that nobody on the content side can move as fast as the technology. So I would encourage them to be, attuned to the technological advances and the evolution that's happening, and be prepared to be nimble as you can, because you'll never be able to be a step ahead of the technology as it advances.
Last word from Don.
Sure. I think in a nutshell, it's convenience and availability. If I buy a DVD right now, there's a lot of things I can do with it. I can show it to a bunch of friends. I can sell it to a friend. I can give it to my brother for him to watch the movie. I can take it to my Dodge Caravan and pop it in the DVD player for the back seat, and my son can watch it on the way, next driving trip.
You can trade it on PureFlix.
I can trade it on PureFlix. There's all kinds of things I can do with the DVD or with the CD. Right now, with the kind of draconian attitude that most of the content studios have towards DRM, there's very few things I can do with it. I can get that episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I can only play it on one PC forever until they decide that the DRM system has changed, and then I can no longer play it, because even though I bought the episode, I'm really renting it under current DRM. Availability, if I can't find what's out there, if I can't find a movie I want to watch, I'm going to find some other way to get it. It might be on YouTube right now, or I could go to Pirate Bay, which is now, according to Alexa, one of the top 500 sites on the internet. Grab it from BitTorrent. It needs to be available. People would prefer, I believe, to acquire something of quality legally that they have the ability to do things with. When they can't find it, and when you impose draconian controls over it, that person is going to be tempted to go elsewhere to one of these darknets or other alternatives to acquire the content. And we want to make that just a little bit inconvenient, a little less convenient than the legal method. So I think convenience and availability.
I was just going to add something scary to that is we watch, when we try to record demographics on this, geolocations where people are downloading things, and we see high spikes right around 10 a.m. in the morning and around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, or 2:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And we've been able to identify by asking certain information back, who are these people that are creating spikes? And they are women over the age of 35. There are moms at home who are finding stuff on P2P, and it's not always legal. And this is not going to be about enforcing lawsuits against teenagers or college students. If you try to start suing moms for downloading content, trying to make it available, you're going to ruin your customer base.
Some great advice. Thanks. Staying with Les, let's turn it to the other side. If you could if we had Bill Gates and Steve Jobs in the room, or any other big shot who has a bigger company than Media Works,
money.
and besides asking them for an investment, what advice would you give them to help accelerate this channel's commercial development?
I think we were seeing it before, and it actually is reflected in Chip's company, which is sort of a neutral DRM. And that means an ability to not only protect the content, but interoperate with multiple devices so that you have true portability. You have the ability within a home to create a subnet to share amongst family members, or maybe even create, like us doing these sort of point-to-point friendship sharing capabilities that is transportable, that it's not dependent on a single platform. The biggest issue that we get in commercializing music is that people come to us and say, can you do the AAC format? If you could do the AAC format, man, I'd give you my entire catalog. And we go, well, you know, we legally can't do the AAC format because people at Apple would turn around and sue us for using their DRM, even though you could find all sorts of hacks and abilities to put things in AAC format. You could even protect it. Presumably protect it through the Helix 10 platform from real, but in reality, I don't know that's the case. But that transportability and that standard of being able to deliver something with certain rules on it. John said it just a few minutes ago, you can't really protect everything. It's just not possible. There's analog holes, there's all sorts of things. So this rules-based way of delivering content so that someone either has to watch an advertisement, even if it doesn't feel like an advertisement, it feels more like radio, or they have to view something in order to do a short 15-second rich media ad in order to then take a look at the content. Or after a period of time, the content expires. If you make a very lightweight, standardized rules engine so that content can proliferate in a legal way, then that would be helpful to the entire industry rather than prohibitive. The issue for the technology companies, and I would advise Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, is, you know, you both tried to own the operating system world, don't try to do it again this time. It's very successful for Mr. Gates, and it almost killed Mr. Jobs' company, but if you go around and try to do it again this time your way, you're going to end up pushing people into other channels that are not going to be to your advantage, not going to be commercially viable for the media companies.
Chip?
Of course, Bill Gates is retiring, but they have brought in a new visionary, a guy named Ray Ozzie, who is a solid P2P guy. In fact, his company, Groove, which Microsoft bought, is a pure peer-to-peer collaboration environment that somehow or another escaped the scrutiny. The fact you can send files over Groove, but Vista is going to be loaded with peer-to-peer capability. Microsoft knows that peer-to-peer is in its future, and Ray Ozzie is going to be the visionary there. So I think they're going there anyway, and what Les said is true too. Is just go ahead and acknowledge and start talking about it. You know, they're going to Firefox is going to have a P2P capability inside the browser very soon. It's going to be in. I mean, how do you just hide the fact that this P2P infrastructure is everywhere and pretend it's not there?
John?
I would, I guess, say know your limitations. I think there's a fundamental difference between software and entertainment. In software, there's a very good case that we should all have the same thing. It's nice to know that when I put something together on my computer, I can send it to you and it's going to work fine. So we tend towards monopoly in operating system and software standards. And that's, you know, for all the negatives, I think it's essentially a good thing. It beats the alternative. But I think when you look at a business like entertainment, you know, what a nightmare if we all had to listen to the same thing, if we all felt, you know, we could only enjoy music if it was what everybody else was listening to. And certainly there's a certain amount of that, but, you know, music is about individuality and identity, and we all have different identities, and that's a good thing too. So I think the organizations that have succeeded in software believe at this point that they need to control the whole ecosystem end to end, and I think they're taking their cue from iTunes. I think that's an error, that's a mistake, and it's also pretty bold of me to say that because iTunes is doing great. But I think, you know, sometimes if you watch a movie that's maybe 15 years old, the guy pulls out a cell phone and it's as big as his head, and you just kind of go, oh God, I remember that. You know, live by the fad, die by the fad. As you know, there are tens of millions of iPods out there, but there are hundreds of millions of cell phones, and there's all kinds of new all-purpose devices coming out. So 2 or 3 years from now, we may look at the iPod as kind of an anachronism. It is considered trendy now. They're doing a very good job of making it cool, but it is a tool. It's there to serve a purpose, not to make a statement. And ultimately, I think that's, that will, the iPod may be tomorrow's disco. You heard it here first. Bold thing to say at this stage. I guess I would leave it at that. I think we provide good tools that leave context up to the artists and the fans.
John?
So I don't think you'll ever solve the interoperability equation. I don't think that'll happen near term. There are obviously other formats that play well with others. MP3 seems to work fine on the iPod and in iTunes, and works fine in Windows Media Player. And there are video formats that are in the same mode. The issue ultimately is, if you're going to put a DRM system in place, then it should do what it is meant to do, which is effectively be invisible to the consumer. When it's not invisible to the consumer, then there are challenges, and you get churn. You have issues with the consumer not knowing whether they are, in fact, as Dan said, or Don said, renting or owning the files. And that becomes problematic, and it just is not a great uptake or consumer experience, ultimately. So, you're looking at in the music space anyway, looking at iTunes, which has roughly 80-85%, given where it is today. The content owners are now going, maybe we should be thinking about things other than DRM. Maybe there are other means of opening this up, because they don't want a concentration of power under the marketing paradigm or the distribution paradigm as physical retail continues to decline. And so as a result of that, they are effectively looking at, are there MP3 models that can work in the marketplace? The files are already out there. They're being distributed. Are there means of ways of putting MP3s out there? And maybe there's catalog segments that could be monetized in a non-DRM environment. And why not? Look at the catalog that Warner Music Group has. They've certainly churned the Atlantic catalog over and over and over through vinyl, through cassette, through CD. There's a deep catalog there that they could put out as MP3s. There's also new artists that would be effectively marketed really aggressively through peer-to-peer, through non-DRM files. So, the content owners have to look at that side of it. We may see the DRM model collapse of its own doing as a result of this, simply because of the overly rigid environment that it holds the content to at the moment.
Last word from Don.
Sure. I think I would ask Mr. Jobs to open the iPod up. I think iPod iTunes lockdown is a negative influence on the industry right now. Let me just open it up to play for sure. But with the iPod, you've got firmware, you've got a CPU, you've got a hard disk. There's no reason why variant DRMs couldn't be downloaded onto that box. I would like to see the makers of hardware create systems that enable fair use. Fair use has been a long-standing part of life in the United States and in other countries, but particularly we have a notion right now as consumers of owning a song or owning a movie and being able to do things for personal use with those things. And when that's taken away, you find other ways in order to achieve that. And those other ways sometimes lead to the content owner being cut out completely. So supporting fair use, I think, is probably one of the most important things that the hardware users or hardware makers can bring forward for us.
Great advice. Let's open it up to questions from y'all. You've been pretty quiet so far. Right here.
John, you mentioned closer relationships between P2P and managed networks. What did you have in mind?
Well, I think things like managed peer-to-peer.
Can everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
No.
Just what you done
Would it be like P2P meets Comcast? Was that the idea?
No, I was thinking specifically of things like what IMesh is doing. The question for those who didn't hear it is, what did I mean by managed peer-to-peer networks? And I guess maybe technically the term is filtered. I was trying to be very broad by meaning any kind of peer-to-peer network where there is some control over what's being traded. And we're fine with all of that as long as our files pass through as they should.
Hi, my name is Robert Lloyd. I worked at Microsoft with Justin Frankel, Tom Pepper, and Cortana McCullough, working on a media player app called Songbird, based in Mozilla. Staff are very excited about Firefox extension supporting encryption. I have a sort of technology question. I think it's fair to characterize like that. How much of, we're talking about peer-to-peer here, which is a technology, how much does the technology change affect these businesses? How much of your existing business is based on sort of stability of that technology? And what are your companies doing to either directly change with the technology? For instance, if Firefox does support BitTorrent, suddenly the web, it would seem that the web value chain and the peer-to-peer value chain sort of collapse into each other. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a great character. It's great then. That's awesome. I mean, the more use, the more consumers can have access to the peer-to-peer platform or base network, the better.
Specifically to the business points, though, how does that change some of the business opportunities?
Well, from our perspective, the interesting thing about P2P and super distribution is that instead of a content aggregation portal, for example, the traditional centralized model being sort of the brand in many cases, in the peer-to-peer model, the actual content and what's inside of it is the brand. And the brand gets to float around in all these networks. And it can even be passed around physical media, email, whatever. So the enlightened peer-to-peer network company, if you want to call them that understands that, will almost give up their brand to their use. What Les is coming to is kind of interesting. And you essentially let content free. Now, letting content free, like a bird, really makes people nervous, but that's really what the core business model is. And freeing yourself from, if you're a content owner, from content aggregation portals is literally freeing yourself from a degree of slavery.
And you're presuming that there's a search function, right, with these functions built into the browser, correct? So it's not just a trading function, it's also a search and discovery function. And if that's the case, then this is fantastic as these things develop. Because again, more users they can search, and more users use browsers, and they do download, Kazaa clients. But I guess Kazaa would argue with me on that one. But there is certainly an openness now to the entire consumer environment. That's fantastic. It helps us a lot because we don't care what the protocol is. We're going to saturate within that protocol and try to make the results come to the top of our content we're distributing.
And we've deliberately designed our format to be modular, so it works fine on peer-to-peer, it works fine on filtered peer-to-peer. You can post them on MySpace. When we started out, there was no MySpace, and it didn't exactly blow us out of the water. We're now using it as a distribution channel. And so just by bonding monetization to the file and then letting it go free, as everyone hears me say, it works fine for us, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes around to surprise us next.
You no doubt get a different answer from Kazaa or LimeWire or eDonkey if they were here talking about the client of choice. But as far as a lot of these businesses, this is a good thing. Does Don have a different view?
Yeah, I think Lycos' approach has been agnostic to the actual source of the peer-to-peer files. We're working on the super distribution model, so the more available methods, the better off for everybody.
Wes?
I was just going to add,
Sure.
It may be better to call this the super distribution panel.
It's not nearly as controversial. Too many syllables. We have a hard time talking.
Doesn't have
You got a good point, which
Yeah.
is who really ultimately cares what the name of the technology is? It's a more efficient, effective way to deliver and create wealth, or deliver value and create wealth, and it's the way it should go.
Most of what's been said, though, is that the name has been a huge issue. It's surprising to me that we call this P2P, despite the controversy that the issue really had super distribution, which no one could ever have.
Fair point.
I mean, it's interesting that you say the super distribution panel, because a lot of us actually have been on these panels for a while, and I think we all came to know each other and see things more or less the same, because we were specifically trying to solve the problem of peer-to-peer. And it's one of those, maybe those sea changes that sort of hits you when you ask us, well, why don't you call it the super distribution panel? It's like, you know, maybe we are moving out of scratching our head and trying to solve it, and now.
John was a lot taller when we started this. Several wounds in the back.
Chip has a better word, don't you?
Well, yeah, we sort of hated to be classified in a super distribution mode all the time, so we now call it agent-mediated hyper-distribution.
You heard it here first.
Much simpler, isn't it?
Much simpler.
That sounds good.
But you know what's interesting about super distribution, agent-mediated hyper-distribution, is that, you know, most people go and find content, right? And you search for it, you go to an aggregation site, whatever. What if content finds you? I mean, what if I, as a content owner, I know my content's going to find my audience, and it's because people are going to get it maybe at a central location, but they're going to go, God, I know Les is going to want to read about this or hear this song or whatever. And so you add to the kind of list of ways people get content, the fact that content finds you, and that's the big, big difference in the centralized model versus super distribution / P2P.
I'm hoping Lycos will build like a little personal tagging library that sits on your desktop. Whenever those tags show up, content zips over to you, you know. That content has that tag, that kind of thing. So you're doing that, right? Okay. Next word. Very good.
RSS on service. Any last questions before? Okay, I'll give one last one then. Looking at forever, 2 years. Where do you see, entertainment, digital distribution evolving, and the relation of that to, pardon the phrase, P2P? Sorry, Chip.
Oh, okay. Has anybody seen the book that's really hot right now? It's called The Long Tail. Actually, it was an article that turned into a book. It's amazing how that works. But it just talks about the world of content and how the real business of the internet and the future of content is to be able to provide this entire universe of stuff. The reason why it's not being provided at this point is because the centralized model doesn't scale. It doesn't. The long tail is impossible without peer-to-peer. And anyone I sat at a panel yesterday with several folks that were saying they're already choking to death, and there's no model in sight unless they can get more advertising revenue to pay for their bandwidth costs. And I was in the ad agency business before I got in this, and I see what recessions do to ad dollars. They go away really, really fast. So anyway, I just think that if the long tail is going to happen, it's going to happen with this type of infrastructure. Okay?
I'm intrigued by the idea of peer-to-peer in the mobile space, the idea that every device can talk to the devices around it, and that this forms a network. I think actually I've answered this question that way before, strictly theoretically, and now I'm going to embarrass myself a bit. There's a device, I believe it's called the Milo. Did I get that right? Yeah, good. Hey, sweet. I think that's cool. It's a Skype-based phone and portable. So this is the first example of it that I've actually seen. So again, I guess we're moving from theoretical to actual. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think it's possible that, if I were to say send someone in this audience an email right now on a wireless device, it would go through the central server and get to you. There's no reason why I can't go straight to you if you're here and if our devices know about each other. So I think peer-to-peer is the architecture that makes that work. And I'm excited to see it emerging.
I think as the model evolves, from the consumer's perspective, there's still going to be a need to have a destination. People congregate around destinations on the internet, just the way that people have in other media historically, and as we have as humankind. It's not going to change. You want to go to a place, find something. I mean, at the base level, we're still hunter-gatherers, and that's what we do on the internet. And it's the best vehicle for hunting and gathering that you could possibly find ever. And so you're going to go to a familiar destination. Whether your content is coming to you from associates, friends, sourced directly through that, that's going to be a key piece. So whether large media entities turn and figure out this model for the super distribution and the efficiency that it offers them, that's terrific. Or whether people determine that large media is displaced by that, that's where the evolution is at the moment.
Don?
So 2 years is quite a long time in this space. A lot of different things can happen. But I think wireless technology is one of the things that's going to make a big change. I think as WiMAX and the proliferation of broadband and other ways to have a highly reliable network around you as you're moving around will enable you to swap music, swap movies with devices nearby you. And super distribution is one of the ways that makes that a viable, commercially acceptable behavior. I would love to see iPods with Wi-Fi or some other ways so that I could share some of my songs. And maybe they only play 3 times for free on my friend's iPod until he goes back and docks and pays for them. But that would be a way to share things with people. Those are where I see most of the changes happening. I also think over the next 2 years we'll see the movement in peer-to-peer from just mostly music now to more so in films and in games. I think those 3 areas really have yet to blossom in peer-to-peer.
Billy? I agree with the last point that Don made. I think, don't hold me to 2 years, but if we can change the word 2 for a couple or several years, I think that we'll see increasing openness from the studios to eventually a realization that peer-to-peer and the distributed computing model really is the only effective way to get full-length films out there. And we see little pieces of that openness. They started with Cinema Now and MovieLink in terms of downloads just in the last couple of months now. They've given certain titles the ability to be burned now to a DVD. So there's little inklings that we see out there of it starting to open up, and I think that certainly over the next couple of years, what's happened with iTunes and distribution of certain television shows will increase on the film side, and we'll see the origins of distributed peer-to-peer film.
Final comment from Les.
That's the unfortunate thing, is to go last when you're on a panel with guys who are very smart and know what's going on in the industry. But having said that, since they are so smart guys, I think what you're seeing and hearing on this panel is this. Each one of these companies is actually building the back office infrastructure, the business models, and the means that in 2 years you'll see be a clear reality on the horizon for commercial use of the peer-to-peer channel. So if you look at John Beezer's model at WeShare, the accounting for sharing and super distribution is not a trivial matter. Most of these panels that I've been on with John, I've always focused on, John, how do you get your content out to P2P, how successful it's been. That back office that he runs, believe me, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. Yet it is the appropriate type of back office that you need for super distribution in a distributed network. The type of things that MusicNet's doing, integrating into a commercial network, that's for peer-to-peer. That hasn't been done before. This is like the first thing. You guys are seeing the first step toward proper commercialization. What Lycos is providing, several companies have been trying to think about that. There's All Pures, a bunch of other folks that are out there trying to do things like this. But a major company stepping up to do that, that's a big deal. And even, Billy, what you're doing with PureFlix, you're going to go from bricks to clicks, and you'll be able to make the transition. 2 years from now, you're going to see the horizon change to where people will go, of course, distribute it. I got infrastructure. I did a deal with WeShare. I did a deal with music. That's what you're going to see in 2 years. I don't think any of us have the correct crystal ball as to which device takes over, if Apple's still, properly at the height of its iPod, euphoria, or whether or not Microsoft has taken over the world again. But one thing's for certain, people are going to move to more efficient channel. So in 2 years, I think the commercialization of what we see in P2P today will become second nature in both the press, the minds of media owners, and the consumer, guess what, has already adopted it.
Can I mention that Les is sitting in the strategic hotspot? Distribution is key.
Distribution is key. That's right.
Thank you very much. How do we do, Mr. Sampat?
Very good.
Thank you all very much. Share wisely and take care.